Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're watching or listening. My name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. Today we're going to be providing another installation into our Anti-Federalist Papers series going on number 19. So if you haven't gone back and watched 1 through 18, I would highly encourage you to do so because understanding these, in addition to the Federalist Papers, is going to provide you a very advantageous supplementary understanding of the U.S. Constitution. And of course, understanding the U.S. Constitution is absolutely necessary if you intend to combat any sort of lawfare that will be waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the Anti-Federalist Papers. There are multiple institutions from which you can get a paper and digital copy of the Anti-Federalist Papers. Go ahead and get both. While you're out there looking, if you haven't already, go ahead and get a copy, both paper and digital, of the Federalist Papers so you can join us in comparing and contrasting the arguments for and against ratifying the U.S. Constitution. Excellent. So number 19, and the reason it's titled like this, 18 through 20, is because it was difficult when going through the historical record to find the exact distinction of when each of the papers 18 through 20 were published. So what they did when compiling these for this collection of the Anti-Federalist Papers was found the similar topics, similar dates, and then aligned them together in 18 through 20, rather than saying 18, 19, and 20. Regardless, same topic, same issue being discussed. Excellent. So this one is titled, What Does History Teach? It's part 2, continuation of last lecture's topic. From a Newport man, wrote this wit, which appeared in the Newport Mercury, March 17th, 1788. He says this: I perceive in your last issue a piece signed, quote, a Rhode Island man. It seems wrote with an air of confidence and triumph. He speaks of reason and reasoning. I wish he had known or practiced some of that reasoning he so much pretends to. His essay had been much shorter. We are told in this piece, as well as others on the same side, that an ability given to British subjects to recover their debts in this country will be one of the blessings of a new government, by inducing the British to abandon the frontiers or be left without excuse. But the British have no other reason for holding the posts after the time named in the treaty of their evacuation than the last reason of kings, that is, their guns. And giving them the treasure of the United States is a very unlikely means of removing that. If the British subject met with legal impediments to the recovery of his debts in this country, for the British government to have put the same stop on our citizens would have been a proper, an ample, retaliation. But there is nothing within the compass of possibility of which I am not perfectly sure that I am more fully persuaded of than I am that the British will never relinquish the posts in question until compelled by force, because no nation pays less regard to the faith of treaties than the British. Ouch. Witness their conduct to the French in 1755, when they took a very great number of men of war and merchant ships before war was declared, because the French had built some forts on the south side of an imaginary line in the wilds of America. And again, the violation of the articles by which the people of Boston resigned their arms, and the violation of the capitulation of Charlestown. Again, we are told that Congress has no credit with foreigners, because they have no power to fulfill their engagements. And this, we are told, with a boldness exceeded by nothing but its falsehood, perhaps in the same paper that announces to the world the loan of 1,000,000 of Holland guilders. If I mistake not, a sum equal to 250,000 Spanish dollars, and all this done by the procurement of that very Congress, whose insignificancy and want of power had been constantly proclaimed for 2 or 3 years before. The Dutch are the most cautious people on earth, and it is reasonable to suppose that they were abundantly persuaded of the permanency and efficacy of our government by their risking so much money on it. We are told that so long as we withhold this power from Congress, we shall be a weak, despised people. We were long contending for independence, and now we are in a passion to be rid of it. But let us attempt to reason on this subject, and see to which side that will lead us. Reason is truly defined, in all cases short of mathematical demonstration, to be a supporting that the like causes will produce the like effects. Let us proceed by this rule. The Swiss cantons for 100 years have remained separate independent states, consequently without any controlling power. even the little republic of St. Marino, containing perhaps but little more ground than the town of Newport, and about 5,000 inhabitants, surrounded by powerful and ambitious neighbors, has kept its freedom and independence these 1,300 years, and is mentioned by travelers as a very enlightened and happy people. If these small republics, if the neighborhood of the warlike and intriguing courts of Paris, Vienna, and Berlin have kept their freedom and original form of government, is it not reasonable to suppose that the same good sense and love of freedom on this side of the Atlantic will secure us from all attempt within and without? And the only internal discord that has happened in Switzerland was on a religious account, and a supreme controlling power is no security against this, as appears by what happened in Ireland in the time of Charles I, and in France in the time of Henry IV. It seems rational in a case of this importance to consult the opinion of the ablest men, and to whom can we better appeal than to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, J.J. Rousseau. Jean-Jacques is Jean, Jacques is Jacques. A very, very noteworthy philosopher who very heavily influenced the founders. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. His conversation, or the debate between him and Thomas Hobbes, well worth your time studying. Thomas Hobbes basically said, you can't trust men to conduct their own affairs, thus they must be governed. Rousseau responded saying, well, of course, man can't be trusted with their own affairs, so why put men in charge of other men's affairs? Neither can be trusted. It's a very, very brilliant rebuttal. To J.J. Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a Republican by birth and education, one of the most exalted geniuses and one of the greatest writers of his age. He is very significant, especially for their time. Or perhaps any age. A man the most disinterested and benevolent towards mankind. A man the most industrious in the acquisition of knowledge and information by travel, conversation, reading, and thinking. And one who has wrote a volume on government entitled The Social Contract. Yes, him and Immanuel Kant both wrote on a social contract. I suggest both of you read both of them. Both of you? No. That you read both of them. They are worth reading. Entitled The Social Contract, wherein he inculcates that the people should examine and determine every public act themselves. Can you see how strongly he influenced the in the course of human events sort of mentality that Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, John Dickinson, and many others had? His words are that, quote, every law that the people have not ratified in person is void. It is no law. The people of England think they are free. They are much mistaken. They are never so, but during the election of members of Parliament. As soon as they are elected, they are slaves. They are nothing. And by the use they make of their liberty during the short moments they possess it, they will deserve to lose it. This is far from advising that 30,000 souls should resign their judgments and wishes entirely to one man for 2 years, to a man who perhaps may go from home sincere and patriotic, but by the time he has dined in pomp for a week with the wealthy citizens of New York or Philadelphia, will have lost all his rigid ideas of economy and equality. What does that sound like? How does that translate to today? Maybe swamp, autocracy, oligarchy, these words that we hear being tossed around in contemporary political dialogue. He becomes fascinated with the elegancies and luxuries of wealth. Objects and intimations like these soon change the champion for the people to an advocate for power, and the people, finding themselves thus basely betrayed, cry that virtue is but a name. We are not sure that men have more virtue at this time and place than they had in England than in the time of George II. Let anyone look into the history of those times and see with what boldness men changed sides and deserted the people in pursuit of profit and power. History does not change. The only things that change are the names. Behaviors, human nature, it all stays the same. There are no exceptions. If only men were angels. If there was one phrase to sum up all of these Anti-Federalist Papers, it would be, if only men were angels. If only, if only. If to take up the cross and renounce the pomps. Did we read? Yes, we did. If to take up the cross and renounce the pomps and vanities of this sinful world is a hard lesson for divines, 'tis much harder for politicians. A Cincinnatus, a Cato, a Fabricius, and a Washington are rarely to be found. Go ahead and highlight that. Go ahead and highlight a Cincinnatus, a Cato, a Fabricius, and a Washington are rarely to be found. It is a very bad idea to build governments on trust and faith when those who are trustworthy and those who are worthy of faith are very rarely found. That's why even if you have at this point in time a trustworthy and a person who has earned your faith, even at this time, if you have that person, do not form a government around trust and faith, because that person is a diamond in the rough. We are told that the trustees of our powers and freedom, being mostly married men and all of them inhabitants and proprietors of the country, is an ample security against an abuse of power. Would you agree? Whether human nature be less corrupt than formerly, I will not determine, but this I know, that Julius Caesar, Oliver Cromwell, and the nobles of Venice were natives and inhabitants of the countries whose power they usurped and drenched in blood. And that is a very short list of a huge list, of an infinitely expansive list. Certainly in a painful disproportion to when compared with these gentlemen. Yeah. I'm thinking the proportion is maybe 1 to 1,000. Good to these individuals. Okay. Again, our country is compared to a ship of which we are all passengers, and from thence 'tis gravely concluded that no officer can ever betray or abuse his trust. But that men will sacrifice the public to their private interest is a saying too well known to need repeating. It's an adage for a reason. And the instances of designed shipwrecks and ships run away with by a combination of masters, supercargoes, and part owners is so great that nothing can equal them but those instances in which pretended patriots and politicians have raised themselves and families to power and greatness by destroying that freedom and those laws they were chosen to defend. Golly, doesn't that just turn your stomach? These were written in 1788 before the U.S. Constitution was even implemented, or it was completely finalized. They knew what was going to happen, and the advocates for it were warned, and they just didn't listen. Or they were like Hamilton, knew what they were doing and intentionally. You get the idea. If it were necessary to cite more precedents to prove that the people ought not to trust or remove their power any further from them, the little republic of Luca, I think, might be pronounced Lucia. I'll say Lucca for now, but I think it is Lucia. The little republic of Lucca may be mentioned, which, surrounded by the dukedom of Tuscany, has existed under its present constitution about 500 years, and as Mr. Addison says, is for the extent of its dominion the richest and best peopled of all the states of Italy. And he says further that, quote, the whole administration of the government passes into different hands every 2 months. This is very far from confirming the doctrine of choosing those officers for 2 years who were before chosen for 1. The want of a decisive, efficient power is much talked of by the discontented, and that we are in danger of being conquered by the intrigues of European powers. But it has already been shown that we have delegated a more decisive power to our Congress than is granted by the Republic Swiss cantons to their general diet, or diet. These republics have enjoyed peace some hundreds of years, while those governments which possess this decisive, efficient power so much aimed at are as often as 20 or 30 years, drawing their men from the plow and loom to be shot at and cut each other's throats for the honor of their respective nations. And by how much further we are from Europe than the Swiss cantons with their allies, and Lucca and St. Marino are from France, Prussia and Austria, by so much less are we in danger of being conquered than those republics which have existed some earlier than others, but the youngest of them 130 years without being conquered. As for the United Provinces of Holland, they are but nominal republics. Their stadtholder, very much like our intended president, making them in reality a monarchy and subject to all its calamities. But supposing that the present Constitution, penned by the ablest men 4 or 5 years in completion, and its adoption considered as the happiest event, supposing, I say, the present Constitution destroyed, can a new one be ratified with more solemnity, agreed to in stronger or more binding terms? See, that's important because the Articles of Confederation require unanimous consent for it to be amended, let alone completely replaced. The Philadelphia Convention, what we know as the Constitutional Convention, called 70 delegates. Only 55 showed up. Only 39 voted to ratify. That's barely over half. There is no fathomable way to argue that that was a happily consented to, or even consented to at all, document. Only half. Barely half. Barely over half. 39 out of 70 delegates. Barely over half. They couldn't even convince all of the delegates who had attended. So no, it was not ratified. It was not happily embraced. What security can be given that in 7 years hence another convention shall not be called to frame a third constitution? And as ancient Greece counted by Olympiads, and monarchies by their kings' reigns, we shall date in the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd year of the 7th, 8th, or 9th Constitution. In treating the subject, I have not presumed to advise, and have intruded but few comments. I have mentioned the state of those countries which most resemble our own, and leave to the natural sense of the reader to make his own conclusions. The malcontents, the lovers of novelty, delight much in allegory. Should I be indulged a few words in that way, I should not compare the new Constitution to a house. I should fetch my simile from the country and compare it to Siberian wheat, otherwise called Siberian cheat, which is known to have been the most praised, the most dear, the most worthless, and most short-lived thing that was ever adopted. But if the freemen of this continent are weary of that power and freedom they have so dearly bought, and so shortly enjoyed, the power of judging and determining what laws are most wholesome, and taxes are requisite and sufficient, I say if the people are tired of these privileges, now is the time to part with them forever. Wow. Much more might be said to show the bitterness and mischief contained in this gilded pill, but being fond of brevity, I shall rely on the good sense of the public to keep themselves out of the trap, and sign myself in plain English. Signed, a Newport man. Excellent. So that's what that gentleman had to say in Anti-Federalist paper number 19. You'll see in the next one, it's going to be 21. We did not skip over 20, like I was explaining earlier and in the previous lecture. When compiling the Anti-Federalist papers, it was difficult to find exactly where 18, 19, and 20 were, but they all related to the same topics, were published around the same time. So when the Anti-Federalist papers were being compiled, they were listed side by side, but because there wasn't a clear distinction between 18, 19, and 20, they were just compiled in that nature, saying 18 through 20 part 1, and then 18 through 20 part 2. So I just want to say that to make sure you don't think we skipped over 20, that I'm trying to cut out any information, anything like that. That's just sometimes how the historical record plays out. Sometimes there are snippets and excerpts that are missing or make compiling important information somewhat difficult. So last time, not skipping over anything. If you have any questions about what was said in that paper, if you have any questions about what was said in the previous papers, or if there's a topic you'd like me to cover in a future lecture, please post about them down in the comments, because the entire purpose of the Calhoun School of Law is to provide you with the necessary skills and information to combat any sort of lawfare waged against you, your loved ones, or your hard-earned property. So please, if you have any questions at all, post them down in the comments. Excellent. So my name is Caleb Glick. I'm a lawyer here in the great state of Texas with the Calhoun School of Law to bring you a lot of information that plenty of bad folks would rather you not have. I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and if not, while you're down in the comments, go ahead and let me know how I can do better so I can best serve that purpose of helping you. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'm not sure what the topic for the next lecture is going to be, but I'll do my best to make it as informative and entertaining as this one, if not more so. Regardless of the topic of the next lecture, until I see y'all then, I bid you all farewell.